Hi guys, and welcome to Cultnomics. My name is Paul Hanley, and today I'm going to be chatting to you about the J-curve model of depreciation and trade. In this video, we are going to examine the impact of a depreciation in currency on the trade of a country. And in order to do this, we look at something called a J-curve model. And the name of that will hopefully make some sense by the end of this video. So on our model here, we have the BOP, or balance of payments for a country, up on the y-axis, and we're concentrating on the current account, which mainly focuses on the trade of that country, so exports and imports. On the top half of the diagram, we have a surplus for the economy, and what that means is that exports are greater than imports for this country here if they're operating in a surplus. The deficit is below the middle line here, below the x-axis, and for a deficit that would mean that imports are greater than exports for this country, and if exports are the exact same as imports, we would be at point 0 here, so 0 all along the x-axis. And the x-axis measures time. So time in this model is important because the effects of a depreciation change over time. So we're going to look at it in terms of Britain and their exit from the UK. The British economy for the last few years has operated a deficit in the current accounts of their balance of payments. And what this means is they import more goods and services than they export. So because of that, we can start off here in our diagram, and this represents the UK economy in a deficit situation. And what we're going to say is at this time point here, and we'll actually note a time here, this time point is around when there was the referendum. So we're going to say this represents June of 2016. And this referendum was a vote on whether to leave the EU or not. And the UK voted to leave the European Union. Now this had a shock-like effect on the economy, which meant that there was an awful lot of people who took their investment out of the UK, and there was a lot of uncertainty in the economy. Because of this, we had a depreciation of the British currency, which is sterling. So we had a depreciation of sterling in the market. So post June 2016, the referendum, the depreciation happened, and what we do to represent that through a J-curve model is we say that we predict it would have this type of effect on the economy. Initially, trade would decrease in terms of its balance, and then it would start to increase over time and maybe eventually go into a surplus situation over here. So I'm just going to note a couple of phases here. We have a downward phase for the initial part, and the downward phase we'll say is phase number 1. Then we have kind of a point which the balance of payments start to increase again, or at least don't drop anymore, and we'll call this phase 2. And then we have a point where the balance of trade starts to improve for definite, and we will call this phase number 3 over here. Okay, so after the depreciation we have phase 1, and we're going to go over here to look at why that's the case. Why is it that post the depreciation of the British pound that the balance of payments deteriorated, in that imports were greater than exports and they grew in that case? Well, there are 3 reasons why this is the case. The first reason is that the expense of imports actually increases following a depreciation. So what does this actually mean? Well, when the British pound depreciated or weakened in value, straight away domestic UK citizens were paying more for their imports because, for example, if you were spending on US goods, that would mean that you would have to trade more British pounds for dollars. In that case, you are spending more on your imported goods. And because of that, the balance of trade tends to deteriorate, which means that you are spending more on imported goods. Thereafter, however, in phase 2, what you tend to find is that the quantity of imports starts to fall. So why is this the case? Well, because they're more expensive, the UK residents would tend to substitute away, where possible, from imported goods. So for example, if we were talking about cars, it would mean that as the British pound depreciated, UK customers would tend to buy less imported cars and instead buy more domestically produced cars. So the quantity of imports of cars would reduce in that case. Now, the actual quantity depends on the elasticity of imports. So for example, if imports are elastic, this would mean that if the price of them increased by, for example, 5%, well then the quantity demanded of them would drop by greater than 5%. So for example, by 10% in this case. So if imports are elastic, they respond proportionately more to the drop in price of imports. Now, phase 3 is where the balance of payments improve even more, and this would happen because of the quantity of exports starting to rise. So why would this be the case? Well, as the currency depreciates, as the pound depreciates in value, it means that they become cheaper on international markets. So as the UK exports, for example, cars, it means that people in the US have to transfer and trade off less dollars for pound sterling, which means that cars exported from the UK are relatively cheaper, or the UK gets a competitive advantage. And again, if their products, if their cars are elastic, it means that they respond proportionately more to the depreciation. So for example, if we still had our 5% drop in prices, this would mean that perhaps the US were buying 10% more cars in this case, proportionately more cars being bought off the UK because of the depreciation. So all these three effects will cause what we call the J-curve effect, which is an initial deterioration of balance of payments followed by an improvement in the balance of payments if, for two reasons, the elasticity of exports down here plus the elasticity of imports in their absolute value, because they'll be negative. If they are greater than 1, we have what's called the Marshall-Lerner condition. And what this means is that a depreciation of the currency will lead to an improvement in the balance of payments. I hope you call back to Cultnomics soon. Bye for now.